we get, I guess they didn't hear that. Gentlemen, if I could get your attention, please.
S'il vous plaît.
Our meeting started. If you could all take your appropriate spots. And I call the meeting to order of meeting number 34 of the Standing Committee on International Trade. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23, 2022, and therefore some members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. I'd like to make a few comments for the benefit of our witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. With regard to interpretation, for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed to the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding in this regard. Mr. Tremblay?
Oui, Madame la Présidente, est-ce que vous pouvez nous confirmer que...
Yes, Chair. Can you confirm that the audio tests have been made for those who are online in order to facilitate interpretation?
Yes, it is.
Merci.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Should any technical challenges arise, please let me know, as we will suspend for a few minutes to ensure that all members are able to participate fully. It's great to see some of our witnesses actually physically here with us. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Tuesday, September the 20th, 2022, the committee is beginning its study of potential trade impacts of the United States Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 on certain firms and workers in Canada. We have with us today from the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association by video conference Mr. Volpe, the President. From the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters, Matt Poirier, Senior Director, Policy and Government Relations. Canadian Steel Producers Association, Catherine Cobden, President and Chief Executive Officer, and Daniel Coulter, Director, Trade and Industry Affairs. And from the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association, Brian Kingston, President and Chief Executive Officer. And from Toyota Motor Manufacturing Canada Incorporated, Scott McKenzie, Director, Corporate and External Affairs by video conference. And for uniform, we have Angelo Di Caro back again. A director comes to see us often for the research department by video conference. Welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for making the time to see us today. We will open up with opening remarks from everyone. Mr. Volpe, I invite you to make an opening statement of 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thought I had the whole 2 hours to do this, so now I'm going to have to bridge it. I'm teasing, of course. Always a pleasure to be invited to this committee, and always a pleasure to speak with the committee and with my colleagues about the impact of trade policies, especially U.S. trade policies, on Canadian industry. The Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 is a correction to a proposal in the Build Back Better plan that scared the hell out of the industry in Canada. And the industry, I'll speak for the part that I represent, the automotive parts manufacturers. We represent hundreds of companies with just over 1,400 factories that employ 1,000 people in the direct manufacture of parts, systems, and tools in Canada. 52% of what we produce in a normal non-COVID year it goes to factories producing vehicles in Canada, and about 48% of that goes to export. In a normal year, 95% plus of that export is to U.S. Automotive production. It's important context because about 85% of the cars that are made in Canada that we supply get exported to the U.S. market. And even though 2 million cars get made in Canada in a normal year and 2 million cars get sold in Canada in a normal year, there isn't a very strong relationship between the consumer market and what we manufacture. The most important metric on how healthy the Canadian auto parts and tooling sector is going to be in any given stretch, short, mid, or long term, is what is the U.S. market going to do? In the U.S. market, in 2021, the U.S. president announced that their targets for EV adoption would be 30%, 50% of the market by 2030. Then in the Build Back Better plan, there was a proposed extension for 10 years from 2021 to 2031 of a $7,500 EV tax credit, and then added to it a $4,500 credit for vehicles produced only in US-based labor organized shops, and then an extra $500 for vehicles with battery cells that come from US locations. The grand total of that was to be $12,500 for any vehicle purchase, or approximately 1/3 of the average vehicle sale price in the US. On that timeline in 2027, all of those pieces would only be applied, all of those three pieces of that $12,500 to vehicles made in the US. So for automotive part suppliers who supplied production in Canada, who relied on those investments being solid in Canada, where more than half of our production went, it was a sign that by 2027, a lot of our production and a lot of our prospects would disappear if American consumers were incentivized at this unprecedented level to buy American-made cars. Never mind that it wasn't, it violated the spirit of the new NAFTA, the CUSMA. It also violated the spirit and the letter of WTO obligations. We spent a lot of time meeting in Washington with senators and congressional representatives from other auto states. I met 10 of them in person, most of them Republicans, hoping that the Senate vote might tilt in a different direction. We met with the White House economic advisors as well, and we joined this Team Canada effort with a whole bunch of people who are on the screen with me today, as well as Minister Ng, Minister Freeland, and the Prime Minister in an effort to flip it around. The new act adds one word, North, to must be made in America, and it changes all of that threat for us. Canadian cars and Canadian production having a home with the American consumer that dictates our future is the most important part. There is one piece of the bill that gives us some concern that we will continue to study and monitor and meet with our colleagues in the US on it, and it is credits for the production of battery cells, battery modules, for critical materials and electrode active materials that right now creates a highly competitive advantage for the attraction of battery manufacturing investments in the US versus Canada. We're in direct contact, of course, with our Canadian government and the implications of that, as well as our automaker customers, on how we make sure that Canada remains competitive in the chase of battery investments. But bottom line, the IRA changed the threat of the BBB for what I call the biggest existential threat to Canadian production and Canadian parts production in a generation, and I'm very happy to see the changes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Volpe. Mr. Poirier, please, for 5 minutes.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to be here on behalf of Canada's 90,000 manufacturers and exporters and our association's 2,500 direct members to discuss the impacts of the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act on Canadian manufacturing. The manufacturing industry directly generates 10% of Canada's GDP, produces nearly 2/3 of Canada's value-added exports, and employs 1.7 million people in high-paying jobs across the country. Canada's manufacturing industry is highly integrated with the United States. So much so that we really do not trade with each other. Rather, we make stuff together. And this is why it is vitally important that we maintain a level playing field between Canada and the U.S. when it comes to business incentives. If we do not strike that balance, investment will simply flow south of the border. I'm joined on the panel today by my colleagues from many of Canada's key manufacturing industrial sectors and from organized labour. We are all united in our concern with the Inflation Reduction Act. Concern that this bill, in addition to other American initiatives recently announced, has radically increased the amount of money the U.S. government is pouring into their manufacturing companies. Concern that this could trigger a flight of capital investment out of Canada and into the U.S., and concern that this could result in fewer manufacturing jobs here in Canada. If we allow this to occur, we will undoubtedly see a decrease in Canadian manufacturing input. And seen as 2/3 of Canada's global exports are manufactured good, the economic losses will be felt dearly on the trade front. Here's how we stop this from happening. Number one, the government must eliminate the gaps between new U.S. incentive programs and their Canadian equivalents. We can get into details on these in the Q&A, but there are several key areas in the Inflation Reduction Act that must force a Canadian response. The extension of advanced manufacturing tax credits, or Section 48C, the enhancement of the carbon capture utilization and storage tax credits, new clean energy incentives for emission reductions, and lastly, modified U.S. domestic content provisions. We know that the federal government is crafting the Canadian response. That's good, and CME strongly supports this work. Ideally, the fall economic statement on Thursday will take the opportunity to announce our government's matching programs. At a bare minimum, we urge the government to at least signal to industry that the fix is on the way. Number two, the government must redouble their diplomatic efforts with the U.S. to tamp down Buy American threats and promote Buy North American approaches. Building on our industry's recent successful collaboration with the Canadian government to fight Build Back Better bill, we need to adopt our Team Canada approach once again. Number three, the government should extend and expand the reach of the Accelerated Investment Incentive, also known as the ACCA, in the fall economic statement. This investment vehicle has been used by manufacturers to make critical investments into their businesses. But we were not able to take advantage of the entire 5-year span of the program because of the pandemic. By extending and expanding the scope, it will give industry a much needed leg up on their U.S. competitors. And lastly, number four, grow Canadian manufacturing to grow Canadian exports. As CME has said here before, our lackluster export performance is tied to the fact that Canada's manufacturers are at capacity. We must get the government to partner with industry to tackle our biggest challenges. If we can reduce our labor shortages through more immigration, alleviate supply chain disruptions by investing in critical trade infrastructure, and incent our manufacturers to invest in their net zero transition and in productive automation, then we will grow our manufacturing industry and, by extension, our exports. In conclusion, manufacturers are very concerned with the negative impacts of the Inflation Reduction Act's incentives. If Canada does not match them, it will weaken our sector's ability to compete with the U.S. on an even footing. We must quickly introduce a suite of incentives that will narrow this gap. This will be seen as a sound investment in our industrial competitiveness that will set us up for economic success for years to come. Thank you, and I look forward to the questions.
Thank you very much. Ms. Cobden, please, for 5 minutes.
Good morning, and wonderful to be back in person, and good morning to those out in virtual land. Daniel and I are very pleased to be here with you. I'm here to talk about Canada's steel sector and the implications we see with the IRA. But just to remind you, we support 123,000 jobs across the country and play a very strategic role in North American economy. We are an advanced manufacturer of a 100% recyclable material, and we are a critical supplier to many key North American sectors, including automotive, energy, construction, and many other manufacturing applications. As this committee knows well, we're highly integrated across North America, and the North American steel industry benefits from CUSMA and from steel products being traded fairly across our borders. The North American steel industry, however, is highly trade exposed to unfair trade practices with an excess steel capacity of over 600 million tons, meaning that a lot of extra steel is looking for a home. Canada's steel producers also embrace the green agenda. We make some of the greenest steel in the world, but we're not standing still. Recent announcements suggest that we're going to be over 45% below 2030 levels, below 2005 levels by 2030, and these are tremendous advancements. The Inflation Reduction Act signals an important shift by our largest trading partner towards both fostering energy security as well as addressing the climate challenge. It builds significantly on policies and approaches that we must pay attention to. These developments will create both opportunities and threats to Canada, and it's very good to see this committee investigating. To state the obvious, the IRA takes an enabling approach to the climate change challenge. A carbon price is not envisioned. And in contrast, over the next 8 years, the Canadian steel industry will face significant increases in carbon costs, with carbon pricing rising to $170 a ton by 2030. So while Canada and U.S. producers share a very strong track record on being the greenest and strongest climate performance, the U.S. producers will be getting the benefit of the IRA investments and climate subsidies without facing an equivalent carbon cost, which will be in the billions of dollars. Given the scale and breadth of the incentives in the IRA, we're also facing the increasing risk of failing to attract the significant investments required to decarbonize. While we have announced over $3 billion in investments in partnership with the federal and provincial governments, we still have a long way to go to reach our mutual goal of net zero. We are definitely competing in a global race to attract this investment, so we need to take note. We don't expect a dollar-to-dollar response with the U.S., but we do believe that Canada must further incentivize our capacity to both adopt and operate climate solutions such as hydrogen, renewable fuels, cleaner grids, etc., while at the same time looking to create market pull for green products. We note that the IRA incentivizes additional green procurement policies, and of course it's built on top of domestic contact requirements that create market pull for U.S. steel and other products, while the Canadian ones are at a disadvantage. By contrast, we do not yet have procurement policies in Canada, and as a result, green steel is losing market share today to high carbon-intensive imports from foreign jurisdictions. We also see the U.S. directly linking trade policy to climate policy. A notable example is the global arrangement on sustainable steel and aluminum. So the U.S. has signaled climate change as a priority, and many of our products share a strong green track record, so I ask, is this an opportunity to further strengthen our relationship? In summary, we think the IRA provides Canada with an opportunity to both reimagine our relationship with them and to rethink here at home whether we've struck the right balance between regulatory, investment supports, and the full suite of policies we need to deliver climate action. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cobden. Mr. Kingston, please, for 5 minutes.
Good morning. Thank you for the invitation, honourable members, Madam Chair, to be part of this very important study on the Inflation Reduction Act. The Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association is the industry association representing Canada's leading manufacturers of light and heavy-duty motor vehicles. Membership includes Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis, also known as FCA Canada. The auto industry is responsible for over $13 billion in annual economic activity, 117,000 direct jobs, and 371,000 jobs in the aftermarket services and dealership networks. It's Canada's second largest export sector. with over $36 billion in exports last year, the overwhelming majority of that, of course, destined for the United States. The IRA is the most significant development for Canada's auto industry since the passage of the Canada-US-Mexico trade agreement. The commitment of more than US $370 billion to fight climate change, including major new incentives and tax credits to support ZEB manufacturing, plant retooling, the development of a domestic U.S. supply chain from mining to battery cells, consumer supports, and charging infrastructure is really the underpinning of a new American approach to industrial policy, and it must be carefully considered as Canada navigates its own transition to a zero-emissions future. The funding included in the IRA is in addition to another $110 billion US dollars in climate and energy spending that was signed into law as part of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So these two acts combined dedicate $41 billion to transportation. That includes EV adoption, so things like charging infrastructure and incentives, as well as $71 billion, again, US dollars, to advanced manufacturing, and this includes EVs and battery manufacturing. And as we've heard from other witnesses, Canada may not be able to match the U.S. on a dollar-for-dollar basis when you look at the size of those incentives. We believe that incentives and policies targeted at the right segments of the EV supply chain are necessary to level the playing field. So we're recommending action in 3 specific areas to respond to the IRA and ensure that Canada remains competitive in this transformation to electrification. First, EV adoption. We urgently need a comprehensive plan in Canada to boost EV adoption if we are to keep pace with the United States. The IRA extends consumer tax incentives for the purchase of EVs, extends an incentive for the installation of home charging infrastructure. It introduces an incentive for used EVs and commercial vehicles, and it earmarks funding for the construction, modification, or repowering of generation and transmission facilities. We're urging the federal government to develop a comprehensive plan to build a public charging network, invest in clean, affordable, and reliable electricity generation and grid infrastructure, and enhance consumer incentive programs to make EVs affordable for everybody. Number 2, critical minerals. The IRA has several powerful incentives to support critical mineral investments, including a 10% advanced manufacturing tax credit for a variety of minerals and new criteria for the existing federal EV tax credit that specify where minerals used in EV batteries are sourced. In addition, the U.S. Defense Production Act includes measures to encourage U.S. production of minerals required to make batteries for EVs and long-term energy storage. We recommend that the government increase funding for critical mineral production with accessible, user-friendly mechanisms to seize on the advantage that we do have over the U.S. in a number of areas, including cobalt, graphite, lithium, and nickel, and these are all minerals that are used in advanced batteries and EVs. And then lastly, on batteries, the IRA puts Canadian battery production at a significant disadvantage. 45X, the Advanced Manufacturing Tax Credit, provides companies that manufacture battery cells and modules in the United States with an annual refundable credit of up to $45 per kilowatt hour. So just to give you an example of what that means, for a typical facility, 30 gigawatt hours of capacity, we're talking about an annual refundable tax credit of well over $1 billion US dollars for every single facility in the United States. We recommend that the federal government provide supports for companies that can be leveraged and compared against the IRA's production tax credit for battery modules, cells, and electrode active materials. This could be achieved by using existing programs like the Strategic Innovation Fund. You could expand the mandate specifically for auto projects. You could increase funding. You could simplify and accelerate the approval process. I'll conclude with that, and I look forward to any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. McKenzie, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chairs, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today on this very important matter. I'm here on behalf of Toyota Motor Manufacturing Canada, and I have responsibility for corporate and external affairs for all of Toyota's operations across Canada, including our interactions with and engagement with all levels of government. TMMC has been building vehicles in Canada since 1988, and this past summer we built the 10 millionth vehicle in our history. We've been the largest automotive manufacturer in Canada over the last 5 years, and last year we were responsible for nearly 40% of all vehicle manufacturing in Canada, employing more than 8,500 Canadians across our facilities in Cambridge and Woodstock, Ontario. Since our inception in Canada, our mission has been to build high-quality vehicles for the North American marketplace. Since 1988, we've enjoyed duty-free access into the U.S. market, first through the Canada-U.S. FTA, then NAFTA, and now CUSMA. Our success is dependent on us remaining competitive and having access to both the Canadian and U.S. markets. More than 85% of our production is exported to the United States, and last year we worked alongside the Canadian government to fight the Build Back Better bill in the U.S., which, if passed, would have significantly, if not fatally, damaged our ability to serve both markets as our industry transitions through increasing levels of electrification. While the defeat of Build Back Better should rightly be celebrated, the subsequent Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, consumer tax rebates now include Canadian-produced vehicles on an equal footing to those produced in the United States. This is great news. On the other hand, manufacturing tax credits available to US-based manufacturers of certain clean technologies, including the batteries that go into electrified vehicles, are subject to a refundable tax credit up to $45 per kilowatt hour of battery output. While the implementing legislation still needs to be finalized to understand the true impact of the bill, as currently written, it could amount to more than $1 billion US annually for companies wishing to invest in gigafactory-scale battery operations in the United States, and would subsequently undercut our ability to attract these investments in Canada, despite already generous incentives on offer from our federal and provincial governments. While the IRA is being presented in many quarters as key legislation to fight climate change, in reality, it is an act of trade protectionism, forcing the onshoring of future powertrain production within the borders of the United States at the expense of all other countries, including Canada. As governments, including our federal government, race to implement legislation that increases or even mandates the sale of zero-emission vehicles in the respective markets, limiting where those products can come from or defining where their powertrains can originate, may support the industrial policy of those respective nations, but it will not make it easier for consumers to get their hands on an electric car, and it certainly won't make it less expensive. Further, the uncertainty related to the IRA is causing companies to pause planning activities until the true impact of the IRA is understood. This delay is shortening our window between when investment decisions need to be made and the point in time when those investments need to be in place to support a positive policy outcome. Much like Build Back Better, Canada needs to take a similar course of action with respect to the IRA, working with like-minded partners in Europe and Asia with similar concerns to ensure that companies are not penalized for choosing to build vehicles and batteries in Canada, either to support our domestic market or for export to the United States or elsewhere. Similarly, we need to look at the consumer incentives available on our zero-emission vehicles to make sure they're in line with those available in the United States. This obviously impacts the uptake of those vehicles, making them affordable to more consumers, but incentives distort the marketplace and can create unintended consequences like cross-border arbitrage, as well as impacting resale values. Toyota remains interested in working with the Canadian government to ensure the best outcome for the Canadian automotive industry through this transition to vehicle electrification. And I thank you for your time. I'd be happy to take questions at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McKenzie. Mr. DiCaro, please.
Thanks very much, and good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm grateful, as always, for the invitation to speak with you today. I'm here on behalf of Unifor, representing 315,000 working people across the country in virtually every major sector of the economy. This includes approximately 40,000 of our members working in the automotive industry. Canada's auto sector supports more than 500,000 jobs throughout the economy and makes an outsized contribution to GDP and to Canadian exports. The auto sector is also a source of good union jobs, jobs that are highly skilled, highly productive, and the economic lifeblood of many communities. The sector's shift toward electrification makes it even more important as a contributor to greenhouse gas emission reduction efforts. Our federal government has demonstrated that it understands the opportunity this EV shift presents to Canada, with major investments to celebrate, including in various unionized assembly plants and hopefully more to come. But a lot of Canada's future success depends on how government understands and responds to the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act. The good news, as others have mentioned, is that the IRA resolves what's been nearly a 2-year dispute centered on consumer vehicle purchase incentives that were only applicable to U.S. assembled EVs. Cutting Canada out of that incentive program would have devastated the industry, with a cloud of uncertainty hanging over scheduled EV investments at various Canadian assembly plants. There are many positive policy developments in the IRA that are worth noting. The Act tailors incentives for EVs, batteries, and battery parts to those built in North America. This is a novel approach, possibly the first ever example of a bicontinental policy, which may present pathways to resolving other lingering disputes around local content provisions. The Act creates progressively stricter demands for automakers to use responsibly sourced critical minerals and rare earth elements to qualify for the purchase incentives. That not only builds greater accountability into the supply chain, it presents major opportunities for Canada to develop this upstream segment of the market. And thirdly, the Act lifts automaker sales incentive caps for EVs, which will help bolster new EV production on both sides of the border. So from a top-line market access perspective, the IRA, in fact, is quite good news for Canada. However, the IRA does present some important challenges to which policymakers have to be mindful. For instance, the IRA establishes new manufacturing tax credits for clean energy production, a mess of new supports that can offset, in some cases, 30% of investment in new factories, including for batteries. Included in this is a $35 an hour, $35 kilowatt hour subsidy for U.S. battery cell production, as well as additional subsidies for battery cell packing and mineral processing on a scale that we've not seen from the U.S. federal government, frankly. To put the battery cell subsidy into perspective, a Ford F1 Lightning contains a battery capacity of up to about 130 kilowatt hours. Under IRA terms, that equates to a subsidy of at least $4,500 per vehicle for the cells, more if we include the battery packing. Put another way, a plant the size of the new gigafactory that is scheduled to come to Windsor would be subsidized at around $1.5 billion just on that program alone. It speaks to the very aggressive competitive landscape for these investments. It's also important to get a beat on the timescale of these IRA provisions. The Act requires a significant and rising share of critical minerals sourced domestically or from partner nations, rising to 80% by 2027. Despite Canada sitting on stores of known mineral deposits, it will take many years before those products are mined, refined, and EV ready. Whether and how Canada can benefit from this condition and whether what bearing it will have on Canadian investments in this space is still unclear. What we do know is that the IRA offers a much brighter future for Canada's auto sector than what was initially presented through the Build Back Better plan. Canada has to take advantage of the certainty the IRA provides and be emboldened to set its own ambitious industrial strategy to maximize growth potential, to grow good jobs, and transition affected workers along the path to net zero. But let's not pretend the IRA is anything other than a bill that advances U.S. interests first. Our union is very encouraged by the comments we've heard from Ministers Freeland and Wilkinson and assurances that Canada is prepared to respond to these investment concerns as required, and that is very good news. Once again, I appreciate the invitation to speak and to share these thoughts and look forward to any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. DeCaro. Now on to questions from the members. Mr. Carey for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here. Your input is extremely important. I come from Oshawa, and you know our history about auto manufacturing. We have Gerdau in just next door. So some of the things I'm hearing, though, the last few meetings are concerning. It seems that Canada seems to be the afterthought. We're being very reactive, and we heard from witnesses here today, Canada's response. Well, there was a time when Canada was in the room, and Mr. Volpe, I think, put it quite bluntly. The IRA is a correction for Build Back Better. Why are we wasting our time on corrections when we should be in the room to get it right in the first place? And Mr. DeCaro mentioned that we have to start looking at us as a continent as far as our competitiveness. So you brought the issues forward, and I think I just would like to see what your thought processes are, because you talked about the gaps for programs, for investments, and the protectionism. Maybe Mr. Kingston, because you represent somebody in my riding, I'll ask you, how important is it for the government this Thursday to get that correction, like Mr. Volpe was saying, actually in the budget as far as our competitiveness going forward?
It's absolutely critical. We need to see a strong signal in the fall economic statement that the government has a plan to respond to the IRA. We do fortunately have programs that are quite powerful, things like the Innovation Fund through ISED, but it needs to be enhanced, it needs to be more nimble, and we have to ensure that we're part of these investment conversations before decisions are made, and we put a competitive package forward. If we can't do that, as we've outlined and some of the others have outlined, I mean, the IRA and these production credits are absolutely massive and create a serious competitive challenge for Canada.
Well, that I agree, and I believe Mr. Poirier, you mentioned when you were in front of finance that the supply chain bottlenecks. Okay, we're talking about opportunities in Canada, and what frustrates me, Canada, we have the ability to take the minerals out of the ground, to process them, to build them, put them into a part, to put them onto a manufacturing product, and then export them for all the value-added chains. And with these critical minerals, you mentioned in your testimony that according to the CMA survey, already 9 out of 10 Canadian manufacturers report encountering supply chain issues already. And it seems, again, Canada's reactive approach instead of a proactive approach is putting us at a disadvantage competitively. So, Mr. Poirier, perhaps you could give us an idea, and I believe it was Mr. DeCaro again mentioned that these mines, we have the minerals. Could you please let us know how long it takes to get do you know how long it takes to get a mine up and running so that we can actually supply these in Canadian supply chains? Do you have any idea? And I think Mr. Kingston mentioned that there's some lithium opportunities, nickel, cobalt, but how many of these mines do we actually have up and running for the amount of materials that we're going to need to put into these cars?
Well, if we don't have the mines up and running already, the timelines or the time horizons for a new development are years, if not decades sometimes. These are big, long-term investments. So if the concern that we have right now is that the incentives are so big in the IRA in the U.S. that we won't even get out of the gate to start those year-long processes to develop them if all the investment rushes to the U.S. So for us, when we here in industry, when we look at it, it's table stakes at this point just to match what the U.S. is doing. And I know that Canada won't be able to match dollar for dollar, but it's been suggested that, by others that we need to be strategic. Yeah, we need to do that, but that stresses the importance of the diplomatic angle, redoubling our efforts to partner with the U.S. and to coordinate with them. We have chapters in NAFTA designed to do this, so we should take advantage of them.
Yeah, and this is the thing. We just renegotiated CUSMA, and it seems that we're not at the table. Even the minister was in front of committee, and I think in regards to softwood lumber, she said she's waiting for the right times or environment, and I don't think we can wait. I think we need to be more aggressive. I think Mr. McKenzie was the one that said, this is active trade protectionism, and we really have to challenge it. And I'm not sure that we're prepared for it. I'm really concerned that, just as you said, Mr. Poirier, these investments have to be made now. And, if I'm an investor, I think the United States is looking a little bit better, and I don't want that to happen. Mr. Kingston, you mentioned the competitiveness and the importance of the programs for EV adoption, the critical minerals, the battery manufacturing. I think you've spoken before about even our infrastructure here for charging stations. How far behind is Canada compared to a jurisdiction like California as far as charging stations?
We're quite behind. The federal government intends to mandate electric vehicle sales in this country and has chosen a target that is out of sync with the United States, which is problematic because, as we've heard, we're operating in a highly integrated market. And to achieve those levels of adoption, the single biggest barrier is charging infrastructure. As it stands right now, the federal government's committed to building 84,500 chargers. There are only 2,500 operational. So we are behind, and a ratio has been chosen, EVs on the road to chargers, which is far less ambitious than what you see in jurisdictions like California. So this is a real concern.
Thank you.
Carry on to Mr. Sheehan for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you for all the presenters. That was just absolutely excellent. And just a little history. I'd sponsored a study of the original Build Back Better because we saw right away how, and we lived through the 232 tariffs, to my steel friends, and many people on this committee actually worked really hard on that. And so after that, of course, they came up with the Inflation Reduction Act. And so I then sponsored this study because we want to get ahead of things as well and to take a look at the opportunities and perhaps the unintended consequences that are part of any kind of deal that happen. The United States is a very large market that we benefit from. But I'm going to start my first line of questioning to the Canadian Steel Producers Association. Algoma Steel in Sault Ste. Marie, the second largest steel producer in Canada, exports and it changes from time to time, but at one point it was 60% of their exports went to the United States. And it would go into manufacturing, car industry, oil and gas, or what have you, depends on the order books. So overall, my question is to the steel industry, what are the contrasts between the implications of the previous Build Back Better plan and the Inflation Reduction Act with regards to exports of steel goods to the United States? And how do you anticipate the Inflation Reduction Act will affect market access for the Canadian Steel Producers Association exporting steel to the U.S.? And is this unique to the Canadian Steel Producers Associations, or do you think it applies to the larger industry as well? Catherine?
Thank you. Great to be fielding questions from Terry in person. Thank you, Terry, for all your hard work on behalf of the Canadian steel producers. So indeed, as you point out, the U.S. market is extremely critical for us. We have two critical markets, the domestic market and the U.S. market. And we've done a very good job, as has been described by their witnesses, in banding together across party lines to create a united front with the Americans on issues that are of significant importance to us. And so first comment I'd like to make is to reiterate the importance of continuing to do that to ensure that we address the competitiveness challenges, frankly, that the IRA creates for us. So we've talked about investments a lot around this table today, and I think that is extremely important, and we do hope we'll see that signal in the fall economic statement. But we also need to talk about what more we can do to protect our marketplace. And in this case, I would talk about the North American marketplace from unfairly traded goods. This is a very important issue for steel, as you well know. And it's one of the reasons the U.S. put 232 in place on other nations. We got, caught up in that, unfortunately, and was ill-deserved. But we need to be ever mindful that it's really in steel, it's imports that are high carbon and unfairly traded that cause the biggest problems to Algoma, to Gerdau, to ArcelorMittal, Dofasco. I mean, you name all 13 member companies of the CSPA. So ensuring that we're getting that right is an important signal for essentially dulling around the edges some of the impact of the IRA. We need to ensure we have, right now, today, the Canadian market is served by 69% of the Canadian market is not served by Canadian domestic steel producers. That's unprecedented. And we need to be ever mindful of that. And it speaks to the point you're making about how do we continue that relationship with the U.S. It's so crucial. Well, one thing is we have to show them we're doing our homework. In the Build Back Better, we saw a lot of discussion, and in the executive order of President Biden, a lot of discussion about domestic and, green procurement, et cetera. We have to get that job done in Canada. We have done a lot of really good work together, but we actually have to bring it now into full implementation. So I hope that it gives you an answer, Terry.
Yeah, very well. And I guess my next question would be the investments that the government has made recently, including in Algoma Steel in 2021, the $420 million to move from a coal-fired process to electric arc is going to secure Algoma Steel for generations to come. I mean, when I first got elected, 2 weeks later, they went into bankruptcy protection. They're that close to closing. But it's also going to have the effect of taking 1 million cars off the road. I think that's really important. And one of the pieces that I think there's an opportunity as well, and perhaps I would like to get your insights on this, is there's been discussions, you know, in the coffee shops in Sault Ste. Marie about how this will play into, you know, how this whole world, including the United States, is trying to get to the green economy, to decarbonize the economy. Because how do you buy an electric car that is made from steel with coal and, you know, that sort of thing? So what is the steel industry going to do to use that as an opportunity in the United States and elsewhere and in Canada to sell steel?
Thank you for the question. Yes, indeed. The investments made, and Algoma is one and ArcelorMittal Dofasco is the other, are generational impact investments in the sense that they are securing the net zero pathway and the opportunity for green steel for generations to come in those communities. But it also it sets us on our course to maintaining our leadership in green steel, which we already enjoy today. But if we sit still, we will, and especially with the IRA, we will lose that advantage. So we must continue to maintain vigilance. In Canada, that was brought to you by something called the Net Zero Accelerator, and we talked about CIIT today. I'd like to put on the table the Net Zero Accelerator is also a very good tool for industries like my own that are very heavy emitters and require investments at a very significant scale. So, when we're talking about moving forward, it's the comprehensive suite of pieces, not that we need to be investigating and basically in response to the IRA.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tremblay, for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. Thank you for being here. And Mr. De Caro, earlier you said that you were encouraged by the Deputy Prime Minister said that she was going to make an announcement with regard to this issue day after tomorrow. And for you, what would be the most satisfying response? What would you be expecting?
Well, thanks for the question. I think right now, still mining through where this IRA takes us and needing the full details, of how this bill is going to work, how it's going to be implemented. There's a lot of questions we still have, as I'm sure other panelists also have. Until we have the full suite of that, we would form an ideal kind of policy response. But I think just an acknowledgement of where this competitive imbalance lies, and there's so many areas to explore here. Our focus is on some of these very critical component parts that are going to build out the EV supply chain in Canada. And I think the federal government's done a fine job in trying to attract this work into Canada, as it should. But an acknowledgement and a recognition of this new gap that has formed in some of these critical battery and battery part facilities. These could take the form, many different forms, enhanced commitment to support these investments, additional programs, additional subsidies available. It could take a variety of forms, but just an acknowledgement of moving in this direction will be very well received by our union and also our members.
Merci. Thank you very much. I'd like to ask you a question. I'm also going to ask Mr. Volpe to answer after you. Given the requirements with regard to minimum accounts so that there be eligibility for incentives, for example, 50% of parts, things that we don't have now. Do you fear that a lot of work will be transferred to the United States?
Was this question to me? I'm sorry, or Mr.
Oui,
Volpe?
oui, je vous la posais.
Yes, I wanted to ask you first, and then Mr. Volpe, I would like him to reply after.
Yes. Okay. Well, I think very quickly, this is always the concern. You heard in my remarks that the IRA isn't intended to be a let's help Canada piece of legislation and make sure Canada builds out its auto industry. This is about U.S. Public funds going to support U.S. workers, U.S. industry, and as we have been on guard for the past, I'd say 5-6 years. Every move that they make, we have to watch extremely carefully. So yes, they want to attract as much of this value added into the U.S. market as they can, and we will have to respond. And I mean, I'll tell you, even beyond what's contemplated in this act, other pieces of the auto supply chain, including new next generation powertrain components like electric motors and things of that nature. Right now, I mean, Canada is still lacking in any of these investments. And if we are going to be a player and we're going to have places for displaced auto workers to land so they can continue, employing their skills to grow this sector, we're going to have to think long and hard about how we're going to attract that among so many other pieces.
Merci. Alors, Monsieur.
Thank you very much. Mr. Volpe, do I have time?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question.
Try my best in the 45 seconds that are left here. I'm not
C'est
worried.
1 minute 45.
1 minute 45. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay. I'm not as concerned about how we interact with the Americans on and whether there's going to be a scenario where we're looking at their wanting to include more American content in American funding. I'm not any extra concerned because we've been dealing with that for the last 10 presidents. This is the business that we do. Like Mr. Kerry pointed out when he talked about Canada's response, it's when are we going to get to a scenario where we're not responding and we're leading? Certainly when he was in government, we were responding as well. This is what happens when you're dealing with a partner that's 10 times bigger than you. I think the answer is, in the way that you get around some of the concerns you have, Monsieur Tremblay, is continue always to do this Team Canada approach, and it's a multi-party approach. I spent a lot of time with members of the opposition parties in Washington as well, pointing out to the Americans that they're so invested north of the border. There's anytime that they draw an imaginary line, they shoot themselves in the foot. What are we expecting to see, or how do you address this in a fall economic statement? Well, that's not the way this industry works with government. I think last week we met with Ministers Joubert and Wilkinson. In the last 2 weeks, we met twice with Minister Champagne, constantly talking with Minister Freeland, who we hosted at our conference in Windsor last week with hundreds of players in the industry, and she did a roundtable there. We don't wait for the fall economic statement. We're always very active, as we were with other governments, as we are with the provincial government. It's there aren't moments. It is, and you're on 24/7, and that's just how it is.
Thank you very much. Mr. Massey for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. I'd like to ask my question to, and I'll list off the Mr. DeCaro, Kingston, Poirier, and Volpe. Generally speaking, what we've had to do in the auto sector is do a lot of last-minute negotiations and attempts to secure products and a lot of things, and come at the last minute. Now that the U.S. has a formula that's accountable and public and transparent, would we be better off to move to a similar model matching that? Because one of the things I've always faced up here on the Hill is other members not familiar with the auto industry. Even when we had the loans, they call it a bailout. Even when we made money on the loans, they've called it a bailout. Then they've called other industries to get the same
and there hasn't been that political support at times. So I'll start with Mr. DeCaro. If the U.S. moves in this formula, would it make sense for us to consider doing that? Because when we don't win a project, we don't know what went on or what we offered. It's never given to the public. With the feds or the province, that's never released to the public. And I think that's what sticks in the craw with a lot of members and also a lot of public I hear from, is that these are secretive negotiations at the end of the day. Now we have one in front of us that's transparent from the U.S. And so I'll start with Mr. DeCaro, Mr. Kingston, Mr. Poirier, and Mr. Volpe, please.
Thank you very much for the question. So I think anytime there's a way to build in transparency to how these programs operate is always of benefit. I will say, and maybe the point I'll disagree on is how seemingly empirical the U.S. model is under the IRA. I mean, there are certain quantifiable subsidies that have been presented. You've heard us all throw around different numbers as well, because it's complicated and it's multi-layered. And again, that 1 kilowatt hour subsidy that's been presented is also overlaid with a series of other advanced tax credits and other measures that have been employed. So how we even disentangle that, I don't know. But I think I take your point, and I would agree that if there's a way to kind of stabilize that, would be of value.
Thank you, Mr. Kingston.
It's an excellent question, and I would say no. And the reason I say no is because programs like CIF have been highly effective. If you just look at the past 2 years, Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis are leading the charge here in Canada in this transformation to electrification. They have invested $13.5 billion, creating thousands of jobs in this country, and CIF has been a key part of that, as well as the provincial government partnering with the federal government. So CIF is a good program. It's a good program and it's working. That said, now that the competitive landscape has shifted, we could do more to enhance CIF. It needs to move faster. It needs to give earlier signals to companies around whether or not they can expect a positive outcome. It obviously needs more funding. So there are ways to improve it, but I think CIF is a good tool, and I think the track record speaks for itself.
Thank you. Mr. Poirier?
Yeah, just to build on what others have already said, we have a pretty big toolbox already here in Canada for the various programs that are needed and that have been contemplated in the IRA. So it's sort of a mixed bag of, okay, well, we have an equivalent program that now is just been dwarfed by the U.S. one. To what extent do we have to enhance it so it matches and it doesn't create a discrepancy? So the incentive for the manufacturing company is very enticing to go to the U.S. So we have to guard against that. And where there's lacking, because there's so many tentacles to this piece of legislation, so where Canada doesn't have an equivalent program, then we'll need to create something or come up with a workaround of somehow. So it's sort of a mixed approach, and that's why this is so complicated for politicians and policymakers, is that there's so many angles to it. But you have the resolve of industry here in Canada, who's already in for a penny, so they want to continue this investment.
Thank you. And Mr. Volpe?
Sorry. I feel like Simon Cowell now. Do I give the last vote? Do we go to Hollywood here, Brian? It is, I'm not a politician, so I get to say what I think, and I don't have to worry about the balance. And where the answer comes is in the balance. We talk about austerity. We're going to this fall economic statement, and we're all saying, boy, that finance minister better cut a whole bunch of programming. And then we say, but maybe you can match proportionally the American $1 trillion investment. Can't have it both ways. In our business, very simple. If Team Canada is chasing a Volkswagen investment or a Mercedes investment, we know that the offer based on the American formula might be X. What we've said to them and to the province is make sure you match that or you're competitive on that. And you don't have to cast a net wide with a $100 billion allocation, because we don't have it. Or a $50 billion or a 10. We don't have it. And I say that from experience. I worked at Queen's Park, as some of you know, in the McGuinty government. We had the next generation of jobs fund. We said, here's the net. Please fish swim into it. It doesn't work that way. What I think we should do, and what's been successful over the last year or so, is spearfish. Choose the one you want to go after and just make sure you get it.
Okay. Real quick, because I don't have much time, I'm going to go back in reverse order. Sorry to the other guests. I'm big into auto, but this is important. Really quickly, if I can get a yes or no, should we match the consumer incentives that the U.S. is now doing? They've changed theirs, including some used batteries and so forth. So like a good example real quick is that the Chrysler minivan built in my riding, it gets a better incentive from the U.S. than it does from Canada. Should we be looking at matching the consumer incentives? And I'll start with Mr. Volpe, Mr. Poirier, Mr. Kingston, Mr. DeCaro, and then I know they'll have to be quick to make it in time. Mr. Volpe, please. Thank you.
They started with the wrong guy. If we're going to do what we do now, which is sell most of our cars to the U.S., it's not as important. If what we want to do is be in a scenario where we build where we sell, yeah, we need to have more competitive incentives here because they just aren't.
Thank you. Mr. Poirier. Yeah, Mr. Poirier. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. I have to move on. Mr. Martel for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much to the witnesses. Mr. DeCaro, last winter we made a study. We did a study on electric vehicles, and one of the recommendations was the importance of creating a robust supply chain for extraction of the needed minerals and doing that here and making the vehicles in Canada. And I think that what factors make Canada less competitive on the world scene for this type of production?
Well, if I understand the question, you're asking if what factors make us less competitive. I'd say that, and maybe I'll sound like a auto sector salesperson here, but there's no reason why Canada can't be among the most competitive jurisdictions in the world. Like when you think about all the ingredients we have, from the natural resources through the existing capacity and networks, all the way up to maybe the most important asset, which is a skilled labor force. I think, as we've said in our recent auto sector policy that was released in August, that Canada should be aspiring to be a powerhouse in this space. Critical minerals is just one key pillar of that strategy. So, I guess the time scales that are presented to us about how quickly and frankly how inclusively we bring these mining projects up to speed, including through careful consultation with Indigenous communities in this space, is vital. So not doing that right could create a problem for us. But giving benefit of the doubt to governments that we're moving in that right direction. But maybe in those cases, not doing things properly could pose a problem.
If I understand, the factors that you mention would help Canada better face the competition from other countries. You mentioned a number of factors, and my question: what would allow Canada to better face competition from other countries? Because you say that we should have everything we need to do that.
Yeah, that's right. And I guess one of the key pieces is how we strategically put all of those components together. I think one of the dangers we face is that we're attempting to build a sector and see this grow significantly, absent a coordinated strategy where various policies will intersect with one another, whether it's climate policies and purchasing incentives all the way to industrial strategies and manufacturing development. And I mean, I'd invite others on the panel to weigh in on this, but in some cases, some of the policy development we've been seeing suggests that there's a bit of a misalignment about what the goals are. And I think one of the barriers we face too in this case is making sure that we're all singing from the same song sheet here, and all governments are coordinated as closely as possible to make sure that this happens. emissions. So I would say that falls on us in a lot of ways. Of course, an active government policy with investment subsidies, as has been the case for generations, will continue to be the case. And I think that's kind of what the discussion is focused on today.
Oui, intéressant.
Very interesting. But if we want to protect Canadian manufacturing, keep it in good health, what, with regard to the IRA, and how can we ensure that Canadian manufacturing and battery manufacturing, low emissions vehicles, will continue to play an important part?
Well, I guess as I say, I mean, this is maybe the most lucrative space there is in right now in developing a clean economy. Canada's, proven that we've got the capacity to grow this sector. I think we have to not kid ourselves into thinking that every automaking nation around the world has the same ambitions as we do. And so the difference is maybe a lot of those automaking nations, aren't equipped with all of the ingredients they need to build out full-blown supply chains within their domestic market. So there's going to be huge competition for these critical investments that'll stabilize the industry in assembly mandates and precursor materials that will be coming online. So making sure that we've got ourselves in the game for all of those is going to be vital, knowing that others want what we want as well. So,
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Varani for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. So I'm going to go a little bit quickly. If I could ask the various witnesses to keep their responses to about 60 seconds. So I'm going to start with Mr. Volpe. We've talked a little bit about supply chains. It just came up in the last answer from Mr. De Caro. Your question about it from Mr. Carey. I feel like you've highlighted the fact that it's difficult enough to deal with a neighbor that's 10 times our size. But when we're sort of doing own goals and having economic blockades of entities like the Ambassador Bridge, as we saw earlier this winter, what does that do to the supply chains that affect your industry and things like just-in-time delivery? And how does that affect our USA relationship?
Thanks for the question. I mean, I think you know that I was the plaintiff on the emergency court order that cleared that blockade, and I did it on behalf of the companies I represent and some of my colleagues that are here before the committee. I said then, and I'll still repeat now, if we don't have our security strategy and our security tactics aligned with the United States, and that we allow dozens of people to cost us hundreds of millions of dollars a day in our most critical industries, then we undercut our ability to sell to the Americans that we are also part of their critical minerals and energy security strategy.
Thank you, Mr. Volpe. I'm just going to move on. I apologize, but I'm going to turn to Mr. Kingston from the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association. You and others have talked about a Team Canada approach, and I couldn't agree more comprehensively. We see on things like tax credits a bit of a checkerboard, unfortunately. We see pretty aggressive stuff at the level of our government, the federal government. We see somewhat aggressive actions taken by BC and the government in Quebec. We've seen a complete step back on the part of what represents the largest auto industry in the country, and that's the part of the province of Ontario dating from the 2018 election. How do you respond to that kind of efforts in terms of the Team Canada approach you're promoting?
Yeah, I completely agree. We need stronger consumer incentives across the board, and that includes in provinces like Ontario, the largest auto market that we have in Canada, where we do not have an incentive. And that's where our concern with the zero-emission vehicle sales mandate comes in, because the government wants to hit these targets and regulate sales, yet we have a patchwork of incentives that across the board are lower than what we have in the United States.
Thanks. And if I could turn to Ms. Cobden, and I feel I agree with you on the green procurement piece completely. I feel like, however, there seems to be a bit of synergy now that we didn't see before, where we've got sort of a very aggressive climate activist government in the United States dealing with a Canadian partner that's already taken a lot of steps and a lot of measures, where I would express some polite disagreement, and you educate me otherwise. But my understanding, when you said that your industry is trade exposed, my understanding is that the way that the carbon price is calibrated is that with the output-based pricing system, it's meant to protect from trade-exposed industries such as steel. So is that mechanism doing the work it's meant to do? And if it's not, please explain to us how we could tweak it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question. And to be clear, that is the construct of the OBPS, and we need to ensure that it does not. So I'm more putting on the table that it's quite critical that we continue to put our trade exposure centrally into the conversation about how the regulations get developed. So we see proposals currently that are worrisome. However, we are going to be optimistic that we will remember the trade exposure of the steel industry as we look to update those regulations. So as you may be well aware, there was a Canada Gazette notice put out on Friday, and in that notice it doesn't say we won't modify your stringency and we won't reduce your standard. Instead, we will study it further. And so what I want to put on the table back is we must remember our trade exposure, or the competitiveness hit on the industry will be insurmountable.
And I think I've got about 50 seconds left, Madam Chair. So I just put something to Mr. DeCaro. I think it's helpful to have Unifor here, particularly when the notwithstanding clause is being used preemptively by the Government of Ontario to affect unionized workers in the education sector. But can you just elaborate upon your views on critical mineral battery production here in Canada and how we can empower that to actually develop further, so the production itself here domestically?
Well, very quickly, I think we know that there is going to be a lot of capacity needed in this space of battery manufacturing, and as others have mentioned, landing these factories in Canada is going to be vital, not just for the growth of the supply chain domestically, but you have to understand that there's going to be quite a bit of disruption because of this transition for workers who are going to currently building parts that are not going to be needed in these new electric vehicles. These battery facilities are massive constructs that could have thousands upon thousands of people, and they serve as really important landing zones to support a transition. And we need workers supporting what's going on and not being victims to this transition.
Thank you very much. Mr. Savard-Tremblay for 2.5 minutes.
Mrs. Savard-Tremblay, 2.5 minutes. Yes. I would like to ask a bit differently my question from earlier for Mr. Kingston. Do you already fear this problem of losing jobs to elsewhere because of the IRA in the United States?
Well, I think we're in a good place with our existing automotive footprint and the recent investments that have been announced. Canada is very unique and fortunate to have 5 OEMs investing in building vehicles in this country. That said, we've got both an opportunity and a challenge. The challenge is on the battery assembly. Because of the size and scale of 45X, it makes it extremely challenging for Canada to compete for new investment in battery cells and modules. Where the opportunity is on critical minerals. The U.S., particularly through the Defense Production Act, is looking to secure, and you have to look at this through a security lens. They want to secure a North American supply chain for these inputs. Canada is considered a domestic source through the lens of the Defense Production Act. So if we get our act right and together on critical minerals, we have a huge opportunity here in Canada.
You also have heavy vehicle constructor builders in your group, do you not?
Our members do manufacture medium and heavy-duty vehicles as well, yes.
I know that there is some concern in the Montreal region. There are a lot of bus producers build electric buses. Do they have anything to fear from this situation?
I think the most important part for the larger vehicles is ensuring, similar to what we're recommending on the light duty side, as the U.S. and the IRA put forward incentives for commercial vehicles, that we just ensure that we're on the same playing field, on the same level as what the U.S. is doing. And Transport Canada has done some work on this and does have an incentive in place. But we have to make sure that we are comparable in what we offer in that space.
Merci.
Thank you.
Mr. Massey for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. My question again to Mr. DeCaro and Mr. Kingston. I am concerned about the consumer incentives. The U.S. has 7,500, which is about 10K Canadian federally. 4,500 is going to go for used batteries. We have 0. Another 500 one, which I didn't realize. I just want your thoughts on that. I'm being told that it's going to distort our market and also keeping used vehicles in Canada. as well. And that doesn't even take into account that we don't even have, say, for example, as it's noted, Ontario participating at all. So quickly to Mr. DeCaro and then over to Mr. Kingston.
Yeah, so this is a great place for a discussion. We would say no, the current incentives are not adequate for all the reasons of trying to incubate this market, grow this market that's going to be vital to both jobs and our economic prospects. We've called for a $10,000 purchase incentive from the federal government. That's doubling the current IZEV incentive, and that also looks at it opens the door for provinces to do more. We have to do everything we can to close that gap on price.
Thank you, Mr. Kingston.
I completely align and agree with what Mr. DeCaro said. We've been calling for a $10,000 federal incentive. That would put us on par with the U.S. $7,500 tax credit. The introduction of an incentive for used vehicles would be extremely helpful. And then also incentives for home charging, which we do see in the IRA. It is a serious cost that faces Canadians and Canadian households that want to buy an EV. So something like a tax credit to encourage the installation of home charging. So we have much work to do on this front.
Do you think it'll actually distort our market too with regards to if we don't have these incentives and lose? Like I know a lot of people will sell used vehicles in the United States, for example. And so how do we reach our targets if all of our used vehicles eventually end up in the United States?
I can take a crack at that. Yeah, we operate in a totally integrated North American market. That is the foundation of this industry. And that's why it is so important that we align with the U.S. in every space possible, including on things like purchase incentives, to ensure that we don't create distortions, that we move in lockstep with the Americans in this transition to electrification.
The Prime Minister did promise to do this in Washington, and I'm told from my colleagues in Congress and the Senate that they're a little bit irritated on this. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Massey. Mr. Baldinelli.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to thank all the witnesses for being here today. Quite interesting conversations and timely with the economic statement just going to be coming on Thursday. I'd like to get into the question, like some of my colleagues here. I come from an area that has an auto manufacturing facility in St. Catharines, just next door. I spent 4 summers working at the General Motors facility, powertrain. My new vehicle actually has its engine that was manufactured in St. Catharines. But I also have, just across the river, a powertrain facility in North Tonawanda. And as we see these movements towards, battery cell and modules and new powertrains, those investments being made. From a selfish standpoint, I'd like to see investments made in St. Catharines and continue there. At one time when I was going to university, we had 3 plants going 3 shifts. 10,000 workers. And now, we're down to 1 plant and 1,200 workers. So we'd like to get back to that notion. I'm not sure if it was Mr. Volpe or someone of the panelists talked about that. Canada needs to lead and not simply respond. And there was an interesting comment, Ms. Cobden, you mentioned about, the IRA takes an enabling approach, particularly on the manufacturing side, driving investment, pulling in investment, where we've seen on the Canadian side, we're almost seeing more roadblocks. And, just looking at some of these vehicle tax credits for having, critical minerals. We're looking at, 40% content in 2023, 50% content in 2024, 60% in 2025. Are we almost too late? I don't think we have the ability to even supply those kind of critical minerals to meet these kind of deadlines. So how is it that we can get to that process? To Ms. Compton's point, that enabling approach. You said this may be an opportunity for us to reestablish or reimagine our relationship with our largest trading partner. Can you tell us a little bit more and maybe provide some comments on that?
I'd be happy to. Thank you very much for the question. As it pertains to the United States and our relationship, and again, I think this is why this committee plays such an important role to keep an eye on that. This is an opportunity, and I want to make sure we all see what we see in the steel industry, which is climate policy is now becoming trade policy for the U.S., and so we must keep pace and, be there in lockstep with our largest trading partner. So certainly that's what I meant about, that opportunity to rethink how can we reengage as a Team Canada, all on the same page, about furthering our approach. Now, as it pertains to the balance question, have we got the balance right? We are doing a carrot and stick approach in Canada, and the U.S. is doing just a carrot. And I think pertinent to my earlier comments, we need to make sure, and we're not against sticks. Sticks have a place, no question, but they need to be at a pace that's reasonable and commensurate with the rate of change that we're going through as an industry. Otherwise, we'll have no competitiveness left. So the question, if I may, one more point, I think we could think through whether we can measure our competitiveness as we do this transformation. Not just have targets on the environment, but potentially targets on our competitiveness as we move along.
Excellent. Mr. Kingston?
I don't think we're too late. And the reason I say that is because particularly when it comes to critical minerals, the United States has put in place very strict sourcing requirements as they try and decouple the battery supply chain largely from Asia and China in particular. And Canada is the only location where they will be able to source some of these minerals to meet these higher stringencies. So I think the opportunity is there, but you've heard the challenges. It's 10 years to approve a new mine, huge infrastructure and spend. So a lot of things have to happen. The opportunity is enormous, but they have to happen now.
Great. Madam Chair, how much time left? Okay. Now, when we look at some of the initiatives, again, that comment on the pulling of investment actually as opposed to the carrot and stick approach. I mean, we've got this an article from October 6th. The one gentleman, Michael Belenke of Entropy Energy, he mentioned the American production credit is superior to Canada's incentives for carbon capture. And he goes, we will not invest material amounts of our financing in Canada unless they fix this problem. We will take our capital and we will invest in projects with a strong bias towards the United States. Now, that's the great fear I think we all have. And so how is it that we can get to a point where Canada isn't left behind? And have you supplied any kind of recommendations in advance of the economic statement?
Where are you directing the question to?
Both you, Ms. Comden, and then Mr. Kingston.
Okay. So I would just say, I think, again, back to the carrot and stick analogy, I'm going to overuse this, I'm afraid. But I think on the carrot side, we need to be strategic. Let's focus on those system-level solutions that can actually help many, many industries like heavy industry decarbonize. So rather than individualized incentives, what about working to ensure we get affordable hydrogen? What about working to ensure that our CCS incentives match those of the states? CCS and hydrogen for sure are going to play or have for sure the opportunity to play a significant role in decarbonizing our economy. So I guess what I'm advocating for is laser focus on where those best incentives are to help us along the journey.
Very briefly.
Provided input, I'd be happy to share it with the committee. It focuses on the SIF program as well as matching the U.S. on EV adoption.
Yeah, absolutely. We can do the same.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Meow for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for all the witnesses for your appearance today at the Standing Committee. Mr. Poirier, the following, one of the things that Canadian manufacturers and exporters strive to accomplish for the 2,500 manufacturers you work with is to maximize opportunity. And given the IRA has implication on a variety of different sectors, can you give the members of the committee an idea of how some of the manufacturers will benefit from this new act signed into law? And how can the government of Canada help manufacturers realize the maximum potential following the signing of the IRA?
That's a great question. We've been focusing a lot on auto, and that's who a lot of these proposals are targeted towards. But all of manufacturing is being peeled away. We have energy production, we have mining, we have auto. So Canada's approach, or response rather, to the IRA needs to envision or to take into account all these other sectors of the manufacturing industry as a whole. So that would be our primary concern. I look at this rather quite simply, too. The U.S. has turned on a shop vac to suck up incentive, and we're standing here with a dustbuster. So we have to make a decision. Are we going to try and match or at least compete with that, or are we going to let all the investment go south? And, when we focus on this, we have to take into account all the sectors, and particularly envision the SMEs that are going to be part of these supply chains, these SME manufacturers, who might not be able to avail themselves of programs like CIIT. So that's why we're really focused on not just matching the U.S. programs with our equivalent programs, but coming up with new ones to account for all these new incentives that have been thrown out there by the states.
Thank you. And if there's any other witness would like to add to it, maybe Mr. Kingston.
Yes, thank you. Our emphasis has obviously really been on auto and how to respond to the specific opportunities that may arise for new investments in Canada. And we think the best approach to doing that is using the existing programs that we have. So use the CIF and make sure that if a company is considering Canada, that we are offering a comparable package to what they could receive in the United States, which we now know, and you can calculate relatively easily through this 45X production tax credit. So that's the key. We have to be offering something comparable if we want to even be in the conversation.
Ms. Cobden.
Thank you.
Great. Sorry if I may. May I weigh in as well? Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to say we haven't talked about this specifically around this table today yet, but there's a couple of other features in the IRA programic suite, if you will, that are worth considering to get to your question of ensuring that we're maximizing benefits and moving forward. One is the application of support mechanisms specifically to the operation of these climate solutions. So in Canada, a lot of our programs are targeted on CapEx, and in the U.S., they've extended the envelope to also focus on OpEx. And I think there's really, really good value in that. That would be very helpful in Canada. And the final point I wanted to make was that another benefit of the IRA to all industry is that the U.S. is now turned on, and we should see solutions that breakthrough solutions come forward. So we may want to be strategic again in Canada to think about what can we do to foster adoption as those breakthrough technologies come forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And following question I'd like to address to Mr. Philp is looking through some of the statistics you have published on your website. It says that in 2018, automotive part shipments were over 35 billion, and the industry employment level was over 100,000. Do you have an early or rough estimate of how these figures may be impacted in the future years by the IRA? And what is the rough timeline for your members might begin to feel the impact of this new act?
A long question, a bit of a brief answer.
The characterization that the IRA is going to negatively affect the industry is not one I agree with. There are threats, and so to link a prediction on employment, I'd rather link our prediction on employment to investments that have been announced by the 5 manufacturers in Canada in the last 18 months, and the ones that we think are going to land in the next 6 to 12 months. That's going to have a positive effect because you need more people to make more stuff.
Thank you very much, Mr. Seaback, for 5 minutes.
So I want to sort of expand a little bit on where Mr. Baldinelli was going. It seems to me that we're in a very reactive space in Canada on a lot of these issues, and we don't have a cohesive strategy to deal with the myriad of issues that are coming down, whether it's manufacturing vehicles, whether it's manufacturing steel. I know it's a little bit outside of, we're talking about the IRA, but to me it raises the question, does Canada need a far more focused approach on all of these issues to preserve manufacturing in this country? So do we need a real strategy from the government, not only on EV manufacturing, critical mineral strategy, energy strategy that keeps energy affordable, affordability, when you were talking about the OBPS, all of these kinds of things. I asked at Environment Committee whether or not Canada had costed out the EV structure to build the EV network across Canada. It was told no, they haven't done it, which to me is where's the long-term thinking? So, Catherine, Brian, Matt, would you comment on that? I think it's critical that the government revise how it's doing this little piecemeal stuff and come up with a robust strategy to preserve Canadian industry.
So thank you for the question. And certainly, strategies need to evolve and they need to keep pace. And as I tried to reference in our remarks, we've seen a big shift. Something really big has happened in the IRA in the U.S. And so we need to be very strategic in our response to that. So as for evolution of our strategy, I think you're right on. The area we need to put some urgent attention to is industrial competitiveness as industries transform in a net zero economy. How are we going to do that? How are we going to measure that? How are we going to ensure it's happening? Thanks.
Yeah, and Brian, I think you said a new American approach to manufacturing and industry. Like the IRA is not just a bunch of tax incentives. To me, it's an overhaul of how they're doing business. And I think we need a similar approach in this country, not just a reactive, some tax credits here and there.
Yes, the U.S. has really taken a new approach to industrial policy, and that's what we see articulated in the IRA. I would argue we even have to go further than a strategy when it comes to auto and the EV transformation. We need action. We know what needs to be done. We know that we need to double our electricity capacity. We know that we need far more charging infrastructure. We know that we have to provide incentives to consumers. And so it's not as though we need to come up with a new strategy. We need action on the things that have to be done to make this transition possible and feasible. And there has to be coordination between all of the different government departments that have a role to play in this. Environment Canada advancing a sales mandate, Transport Canada with incentives, NRCan with charging infrastructure. Let's pull that all together and start moving with some urgency to make this transition happen.
Yes, absolutely. I think I was going to get whiplash nodding in agreement. What CME has been calling for years now has been an overarching industrial strategy for Canada. To Brian's point, we have that. It was the Monique Leroux report that was consulted with industry and all the players last year. It's on the shelf collecting dust right now for some reason. There's the blueprint included in there that will give Canada the industrial strategy that it needs to coordinate all this activity so we can move away from that reactive, responsive, chasing cars attitude or standpoint for industrial policy and actually have a plan. So when these things come, it's just calibrating and reacting rather than have this whole sky is falling attitude.
And so I would say you're saying the roadmap exists. What we actually need is action. How much time do I have? 50, great. Just quickly, we had CN here 10 plus years to get a container yard done. How much of a problem is it, all these gatekeepers that are, making all these projects almost impossible to put forward? Any one of the three of you, or all three? Quick answer, I guess.
I can take we don't build new steel plants, unfortunately. Maybe it would be great to do so. But what we hear from members from people who supply to us is that it is highly problematic, the approvals process and the decades it takes. And it needs to be reviewed to find the right balance between engagement, consultation, et cetera, but actually finally execution.
I know I'm on time. Matt, can you please submit that report to the committee that you mentioned?
Okay, thank you. Ms. Dillon, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll start my questions with Mr. Volpe. As you know, our Minister, Minister Ng, always works to ensure that Canada has reciprocal trading relationships with its trading partners. In the automotive sector, during the manufacturing and assembly process, parts cross Canada and the U.S. border numerous times. Can you please tell the committee what prior concerns the automotive parts manufacturers had that were alleviated with the signing of the Inflation Reduction Act and the changes you saw between before and after? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. And I mean, I get the nature of committee here, and sometimes I don't get the questions because the answers might be a little bit too frank. We had a problem, and the problem was that the American administration suggested a proposal for EV tax credits that was going to wipe out the Canadian auto sector. We worked very hard to get that EV tax credit that was discriminatory against products that came from here changed. We worked with Minister Ng and we worked with Minister Freeland, but I think it needs to be said. I know that people don't like to hear these things. Nothing changed until the Prime Minister personally went to Washington and said publicly, this is unacceptable. We need a change. And then we worked together for the next 6 to 8 months to get that change to include Canadian parts and Canadian cars, which we explained to the White House directly that, the Brian's members are American companies invested in Canada, buying 50% of their parts from the US and buying 50 to 60% of the raw materials from the US. So their drawing a line was silly. I think we ascribe a whole bunch of sophistication and value to an American plan. I spend a lot of time in Washington, and I spend more time talking to Republicans than I do to Democrats because there is no traction to get with Democrats when we need to change things. And in that, I'm always struck by the fact that the only thing that matters is the local politics and the upcoming midterm and or the upcoming presidential election. So I disagree with the premise that we're competing and we're reacting to the US. And, this goes for every government that has preceded this one since Confederation. We're not going to set a policy without a market that is with a market that's 1/10 the size of the U.S. that is going to cause the U.S. to react to us. I mean, it's silly. It's silly when you sit on one side of the house, and it's silly when you sit on the other side of the house. When we talk about what we're doing, and two parties in two different levels of government, three parties if we include Quebec, have been on a hell of a run on investment in the industry that I represent and a lot of my colleagues here represent over the last 18 months. There's no piecemeal reaction here. There's two levels of government in three different parties that have worked together for the biggest investment run in the history of the automotive sector since Confederation. Thank you.
I thank you so much for your candid response, Mr. Volpe. I will follow up with another question. Given that the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association supports its members who employ countless Canadians, how do you expect the implications of the Inflation Reduction Act to impact the number of Canadians employed, and do you think it'll continue to grow?
I think it'll continue to grow, but I share the concern of my colleagues, both there in person and on the phone, with specific regards to 45X. I think that what we need to do as a country, and I think we are doing it actively on a per file basis, is properly inventory the impact of this unprecedented American credit on battery production. And then on the companies that we are chasing, make sure that we have a competitive offer. We're doing that. This isn't my blanket support for the minister responsible. Said the same thing to the Premier of Ontario, who last time I checked, the province picks up half the bill. And it's not a partisan issue, and it's not a question of, do we need a grand strategy? If we want to land Volkswagen, we need to have the best package to land Volkswagen. If we land Volkswagen, there will be more cars to be made in this country, more parts to go into those cars, and more people to make those parts. I think we're doing well. I also think that we should stop using terms like gatekeepers and approvals in our business. You assemble land, you assemble capital, you make an offer, an automaker wins, and it's land use planning. And those rules have been in place and they've worked in our sector. I see a few of my colleagues here representing the OEMs. It's been a while since we opened a new plant. But I don't remember seeing anything remotely close to decades for that type of investment. We're talking about months, and it works at the municipal level, and that's why auto parts makers who are in hundreds of communities across this country work with the municipal governments as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Volpe. On to Mr. Savard-Tremblay for 2.5 minutes.
Oui, merci.
Thank you very much. Question. Anyone who wants to answer, we talked about the requirements for batteries, and there's also a reference to recycling. And is there any strategy for recycling? Should we develop some kind of a recycling strategy? Anyone can answer.
Can I answer that?
Go.
Sure. Merci, Monsieur Tremblay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tremblay.
I think you've hit on something very important. We do need a strategy because in spite of the fact that we are one of the biggest resources of the critical minerals that go into battery production, there is a finite amount of those materials that we can extract in any given year to go into any number of batteries. And those vehicles all have a shelf life. And so what we will start to see is a volume of vehicles 8 years, 10 years, 12 years out that will go to scrap. And then within that, what do we do with those batteries? It's early days. We should lead this. A company that we represent that is a very proud Canadian company called Li-Cycle, with operations in Kingston and Mississauga, is the exclusive partner of LG and General Motors in the recycling of those critical materials through the manufacturing processes. I think what we need to do, and bodies like this would be wise to do, is to bring in experts like AJ Kochar that runs that company to ask him what he's seeing in the market and what that company is experiencing and how they plan to ramp up their capacity and what that cluster looks like. It is an important part of the future of zero emission vehicles, and I don't think we've hit it yet.
I know Mr. Kingston wants to get in with a quick answer.
Very quickly, I'll just note that we have currently in development in Quebec an industry-led battery recycling program. The batteries are extremely valuable. They have huge value in being recycled, particularly because of the critical mineral shortages that we potentially see on the horizon. And I'd be happy to share details around that program with the committee if that's of interest.
Ms. Cobden's anxious to throw 2 words in there.
Thank you. If I have time, I just wanted to say, please don't stop at batteries. The cars that are produced, the washing machines, everything else in steel, we recycle all of that, and we could definitely benefit from that type of strategy.
Merci pour ces précisions.
Thank you very much for those answers.
2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To Mr. DeCaro, I remember the days when formerly CW, now Unifor, was bashed because of so-called costs of having investment in workers. Now we see ourselves with a massive labor shortage, and it hasn't been raised here today. It's a significant one, even for investment. And I'd like your opinion in terms of to share how important is, like, we're going to bring on dental care for Canadians soon. We need pharmacare. How important are those structures for when you're negotiating an agreement? And how important is it for keeping and retaining trained workers in your workforce when you actually have employees who are paid a living wage? And how much less turnover do you have and more efficiency and productivity from that? For years, that was always used as a club against the union, saying that it was too costly to keep these workers here and we're losing to Alabama and so forth. But at the same time, we still have some of the best retention now, and I think that's a clear asset coming into the next wave of shortage of labor.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can tell you, as someone who has to manage the spreadsheets when we're costing collective agreements with when we go into bargaining with the automakers, there's just 2 factors that usually come into play when we're looking at the cost variables, and one is the dollar, and the other is Canadian healthcare, because we don't have to pay the way that the Americans do, and that makes us incredibly competitive. And so social programs, not only are they just good in general as society building policies and programs, but also indirectly serve as a useful attraction tool. And yeah, I mean, one of the things we've prided ourselves on is despite some of the darkest days we've seen in the industry more than a decade ago, and frankly too, going through a generation of watching the manufacturing sector just kind of get tossed aside like it was an old tired sector that we need to move beyond, part of an evolutionary economics of Canada. Now we're all kind of talking in different terms, which is interesting as well. But we've managed to maintain what are good jobs and with good wages and good benefits, and that has not deterred investment in any ways. And we've seen, and Mr. Volpe now recognized too, that the run we've been on the last 2 years has been incredible. $16 billion of new investments, and a lot of those going to unionized facilities, means that we're not a barrier, means that our cost structures are totally competitive, and we have an opportunity to do something really great in this sector as well.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Carey for 4 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Kingston, you brought up something that I wanted to delve into a little bit. You mentioned the U.S. Defense Production Act. And one of the things I learned working with the Americans is the Americans put security first and trade. And I know the focus when I was working with them, we did this Beyond the Border action plan, which was about security and competitiveness. We really focused on the nexus, the FAST, radio frequency identification in order to streamline the border. And I just wonder if you could enlighten us, if we started to work strategically with the Americans, how would that improve our competitiveness from the defense sector? I know, Madame Cobden, I remember the steel and aluminum tariffs. I think a lot of that had to do with defense and dumping of Chinese steel and Canadian. It was something that we should have got ahead of, but then again, they put their security first, which is their right. The Five Eyes taking so long to manage that, and it's a buildup of trust. And how could we leverage that part of it? Because I think we have such good quality products here with steel and aluminum, but I just don't see any action in that regard.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. It's really important to always view U.S. Diplomacy and international relationships through a security lens, because that's how a lot of foreign policy is dictated, and that's where things like the Defense Production Act are so important. If we can show to the Americans that we are a trusted, secure supplier in this pivot as they try and onshore more of this manufacturing and things like critical minerals, chips. We've seen the CHIPS Act pass. Canada does have a role there, and we're recognized in the DPA as a domestic source. No other country is. But I think we really need to double down on that and show them that we are that reliable, trusted partner, and we can play a key part in this supply chain transformation.
Well, it is. I think we can do it all. But again, I'm concerned because of the investments that everybody's making the investments now across the board, Canada, U.S. And Madame Cobden, you mentioned that a lot of these investments are generational investments, and maybe framing it with the U.S. Defense Production Act, Canadian steel quality stuff. I know Gerdau, like you said, the recycling part of it. How could we make an impact in the United States by building back that trust with the Americans as far as security and being able to, for example, make sure our supply chains, like our rail between Canada and the U.S., is not going to be blocked for long periods of time, that we are somebody that's really dependable. How would that help our competitiveness?
I think that it's crucial that we basically continue the journey of convincing the Americans and maintaining or reminding, it's not really convincing, but reminding the Americans that there's no better partner for them than Canada. We have the resources, we have the aluminum and steel, we have the energy, we have the transportation networks, we share the longest border. So I think there's an undercurrent at this table today that you've heard from us, like let's use this IRA as an opportunity. We have shared vision on climate now. That's a new shared thing that we have with the United States that we should be exploiting fully to our advantage, because we really truly are the best partner for the United States.
And quickly, just how
Very
important
shortly.
is it for us to get these generational investments within the next year or two? Because my concern is they're going to be made in the U.S. if we don't get them right away.
Yeah, no, we are, extremely pleased that we've made the generational investments that we've made, and more to come. And every steel company in Canada is looking to be net zero by 2050, and it's a big stretch, so there is going to need to be more. But I don't think we need to believe the time horizon is just in 1 or 2 years. I think we believe that some of this will take, much longer to achieve. We're waiting on technologies and that sort of thing, as you know. So it's urgent to act, but also we need to remember that some things will take longer than just a couple years.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Barani for 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I have 2 questions. I want to involve Mr. McKenzie into the discussion. He's been sitting there quite patiently. But in terms of Toyota, Mr. McKenzie, we know we've heard a lot about in the last couple of hours this $16 billion of investment, which is really generational in terms of the auto sector. We know Toyota's been in Southern Ontario since '97. In 2019, you opened a second plant to promote the RAV4. Can you talk to us a bit about Toyota's decision to continue their investments in Southern Ontario in the auto industry, and what the success we had with fighting back on Build Back Better has meant to the industry, including the electrification of the auto industry for Toyota? So over to you, sir.
Thank you for that. Yeah, lots to add there, but our investment cycles are a little bit different than some of the announcements last year and a half. But that doesn't mean that we're not actively looking at opportunities in Canada, and it certainly doesn't mean that we're not committed to the Canadian market and manufacturing cars in Canada. Like today, I'm at our manufacturing plant in Cambridge, and we're currently launching the new Lexus RX, which is obviously a very prestigious model for us. And we'll be going into start of production of that a little bit later in this month. That's a significant investment. We haven't really talked about that publicly. It's not attached to any public funding. But for us, the business moves on. We've launched 2 models in the last year. Our business and our future here is pretty secure and pretty certain. But that doesn't mean that we're not looking at other opportunities. Yes, the industry is electrifying. Yes, Toyota is electrifying. We already make hybrids here. We've been making hybrids here for more than a decade. And as we transition to greater levels of electrification, whether it's battery electric vehicles, plug-in hybrid vehicles, whatever it happens to be, we're pretty confident that we'll land those investments here. Like, you need to remember that, Toyota is the largest OEM in the world. We're the largest OEM in Canada by production volume, and we're also 25% of all North American production for Toyota. So we'll get ours. We're competitive. We're a competitive operation here. The IRA is concerning for everybody. And, before that was introduced late this summer, I would have said that, future investments in Canada, apart from the ones that were already announced by some of the other OEMs in Canada, we're going to continue. And but right now it's a little bit of a pause just to understand what the landscape's going to look like. But assuming that's not a threat at some point and it gets resolved, I think our future looks very good.
Thank you. And I just invite Mr. Volpe to just comment on something we've heard repeatedly. And I'm going to borrow Ms. Cobden's phrase because I thought it was an accurate one, that climate policy is now trade policy. So, Mr. Volpe, you've talked about the fact that since Confederation, we've always been dealing with this economic tightening to our southern border. And I think that's right. But I think the environment has entered the equation now, and there's an alignment. Can you talk about what that holds for the future of our discussions nation to nation in terms of how do we emphasize, when you're dealing with those meetings with American senators and congresspersons, about how economically viable and environmentally sustainable Canadian industry is? So over to you, Mr. Volpe.
I'm going to throw you a curveball in your speed round here. I think the 2 things here is, definitely we see an American industrial policy geared to investments in shifting the carbon discussion in our industry and other industries that are major emitters. They're making major investments in companies that will change their path and or processes that reduce that. I also, we've said to both governments is also be aggressive, but also be cautious. We have very aggressive targets in Canada and the U.S. for 50% electrification in the U.S. by 2030 and 100% by 2035 in Canada. I've been on the record many times saying that we're not going to get there. And we're not going to get there not for trying, because we're all going to try, but the conditions and the infrastructure isn't in place to do it. And so if we're still transitioning out of internal combustion and fossil fuel production, let's also remember that we are major players in both of those, and we have to do that. If we're going to say to the Americans, stay away from Chinese critical minerals, then we need to give them assurance that we can help supply the energy needs that they require in that transition.
Thank you very much. Thank you to our witnesses. We've received some fabulous information today. It's very much appreciated. Thank you, committee members. I move adjournment.